You might be watching the news about Venezuela and thinking, wow, that's a terrible situation over there. And you'd be right. But what if I told you the crisis in Caracas could send shockwaves all the way to Moscow, potentially triggering the end of Vladimir Putin's Russia as we know it? It sounds like a wild theory, but stick with me because the dominoes are already starting to wobble. Let's rewind a bit. For years, Russia has been one of Venezuela's biggest backers. We're talking billions of dollars in loans, weapons deals, and economic support. Why? Well, it wasn't just about friendship. For Russia, Venezuela was a strategic foothold in America's backyard, a thorn in Washington's side and a key partner in OPEC, helping to influence global oil prices. The state-owned Russian oil giant Rosneft, led by Putin's close ally Igor Sechin, invested heavily, taking control of significant chunks of Venezuela's oil assets as collateral for loans. This gave Moscow immense leverage over the country with the world's largest proven oil reserves. Think of it like this. Russia was playing a high-stakes game of geopolitical chess, and Venezuela was a crucial piece, propping up the governments of Hugo Chavez and later Nicolas Maduro. Russia not only projected its power onto the world stage, but also secured what it thought were very profitable energy deals. It was a win-win. Russia got influence and access to oil. And Maduro's government got a financial lifeline to stay in power, even as its own economy crumbled. But here's where the plot thickens. The very asset Russia coveted, Venezuelan oil, leads now at the heart of the crisis. Venezuela's state oil company, PDVSA, has been so mismanaged and crippled by corruption that its production has plummeted. The infrastructure is literally falling apart. The oil that was supposed to repay Russia as massive loans is barely coming out of the ground. It's like lending someone money to buy a golden goose, only to find out the goose is sick and can't lay any more eggs. To make matters worse for Moscow, the United States has imposed crippling sanctions on Venezuela, specifically targeting its oil sector and anyone who does business with it. This put Rosneft in a very tight spot. Continuing to deal with Venezuela meant risking getting hit by U.S. secondary sanctions, which would be catastrophic for a global company like Rosneft. Suddenly, the Venezuelan asset went from being a strategic prize to a toxic liability. This is where Igor Sechin, the head of Rosneft, had to make a tough call. In a stunning move in March 2020, Rosneft announced it was selling all of its Venezuelan assets and exiting the country completely. On the surface, it looked like they were cutting their losses and running. The assets were transferred to a new, mysterious company owned entirely by the Russian government. This was a clever shell game designed to shield Rosneft from sanctions while technically keeping the assets under Moscow's control. But it was a clear signal. The Venezuelan adventure had become too risky, too costly, and the payoff was no longer guaranteed. So Russia essentially admitted defeat in its Venezuelan gamble. They poured billions into a country that is now a failed state, with little prospect of getting that money back anytime soon. This isn't just a financial black eye. It's a huge blow to Putin's image as a master strategist. He tried to challenge American influence in its own hemisphere and failed spectacularly. The message sent to other countries looking for a Russian alliance is clear. Moscow's promises of support might not be as solid as they seem. Now, let's connect the dots. How does a failed investment in a faraway South American country threaten the stability of Russia itself? It comes down to two things: money and perception. First, the money. The Russian economy is not the powerhouse it pretends to be. It's heavily dependent on oil and gas exports. The billions lost in Venezuela aren't just pocket change. It's money that could have been invested back home in infrastructure, healthcare, or pensions for ordinary Russians. At a time when the Russian population is already struggling with a stagnant economy and declining living standards, a multi-billion-dollar foreign policy disaster is a very hard thing to justify. People start asking questions. Where did our money go? Why are we funding a failed regime overseas when we have problems at home? This brings us to the second and perhaps more important point: perception. Vladimir Putin's grip on power relies heavily on his image as a strong, competent leader who restored Russia's greatness on the world stage after the chaos of the 1990s. For 2 decades, state media has portrayed him as an infallible tactician who always outsmarts the West. The annexation of Crimea, the intervention in Syria were framed as major victories that put Russia back at the top table. The Venezuela failure shatters that myth. It's a public, undeniable defeat. It shows that Putin can make huge, costly mistakes. It reveals the limits of Russian power. He tried to build an anti-American alliance, and it crumbled. This kind of perceived weakness is incredibly dangerous for an authoritarian leader. When the strongman starts to look weak, his rivals, both inside and outside the Kremlin, start to circle. Think about the internal power dynamics in Russia. It's a complex network of competing clans and oligarchs, all held in a delicate balance by Putin. This balance depends on his ability to deliver wealth and power to his loyalists. When a major project like the Venezuela investment goes sour, it weakens his position. People like Igor Sekin, who led the charge, lose face. Other factions in the government and business elite might see an opportunity to challenge the current leadership and promote their own interests. The cracks in the facade of unity start to appear. Furthermore, the Venezuelan crisis serves as a stark warning for Russia's own future. What happened in Venezuela? A country with immense natural resources was run into the ground by a corrupt, authoritarian elite who prioritized their own power over the well-being of the people. Sound familiar? Russia, too, is a petrostate with a system built around a small circle of powerful individuals. The economy is not diversified, and the system relies on high oil prices to function. The parallels are uncomfortable and undeniable. If ordinary Russians look at Venezuela and see a potential future for themselves, a future of economic collapse, hyperinflation, and humanitarian crisis caused by the very same kind of governance they have, it could fuel social unrest. The veneer of stability that Putin has carefully crafted could be stripped away. So, the Venezuelan crisis isn't just a distant foreign policy issue for Russia. It's a symptom of a deeper rot. It exposes the financial recklessness, the strategic overreach, and the fundamental weakness of Putin's system. It's a crack in the armor, and while one crack might not bring down the entire fortress immediately, it's where the pressure builds. The loss of billions of dollars, the blow to national prestige, and the visible proof that the emperor has no clothes. These factors combine to create a potent threat to the Kremlin. The end of Russia as we know it won't happen overnight. But the seeds of its potential downfall can be seen in the smoldering ruins of its Venezuelan dream. A failed gamble in the Caribbean could very well be the tremor that eventually leads to a political earthquake in Moscow. The story is far from over, and the consequences could reshape the world map. Thanks for watching. If you found this analysis interesting, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. See you next time.